Hey everybody, Robot here for Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com. For all things Vespa, check us out on the web, ScooterWest.com. So now we're on part 6 of the resurrection of this older Vespa ET4. We got the forks moving real smooth by overhauling the fork bearings. The next order of action before we even attempt to ride this thing is get this front brake working. Pretty typical for a scooter that's never had a brake flush or it hasn't been flushed in 10 plus years. Brake fluid dries away or crystallizes and you no longer have hydraulic brakes. So keep in mind, we're going to get this going, and I'm also going to show how to flush and bleed your brake fluid, something that Piaggio recommends every 2 years, and I definitely wouldn't let it go more than 4 years on a scooter. So most important is to have a very fresh bottle of DOT4 brake fluid. They use a DOT4 brake fluid. We have high quality Brembo and EBC brand brake fluid in much smaller bottles. We go through so much of this at the shop, we just go through the full quarts of it. So, and I got like a little squeeze tip on it to dribble it in. So you want to make sure the master cylinder cap's quite clean. You just wipe it off with a rag. You can see the sight glass doesn't even show any fluid in there. In part 5, I kind of sopped up what remaining gooey oil. So you take the pair of screws out, and there's a plastic piece and this diaphragm, and this equalizes the air pressure, and as the fluid is consumed to push the pistons out, it kind of does the equalization. So the way to keep this thing clean is just wipe it down with a rag. It's always kind of wet with old brake fluid. Just wipe it all down. You can also coat it with new brake fluid and then wipe it down with a rag just like this, but just wipe the old brake fluid off it, or the new brake fluid off it to clean it. But it's cleaned up really nice. Set that aside along with this plastic piece. There's a chance we won't be able to recover this brake. So take a look inside this master cylinder. I already sopped up what remaining fluid. So you can see there's some kind of remains of just like goopy old brake fluid in there. And try to wipe it out the best we can. You don't want to leave any of that stuff in there. We're going to put a very small amount of brake fluid in there, and that will help dissolve, or not brake fluid, this is brake parts cleaner, and it dissolves old brake fluid. And we'll take some Q-tips and wipe up the remains the best we can. And don't be afraid to get a couple of Q-tips dirty and discard them just to wipe it up. You might want to sop up that goop that we're making, and then use a clean rag, just kind of sop it up. That's like the easiest way to kind of clean out. You could take this whole master cylinder off, kind of clean it. They aren't really rebuildable. You can't really get a rebuild kit for these things. You just replace them. They're not all that expensive, not really worth the hassle. Plus you get a brand new lever with it. So we'll kind of clean it up the best we can. Even the sight glass, be careful not to get too much brake fluid cleaner in there, because it will kind of frost up the plastic window. So that's probably the best we're going to get it. At this point, let's sop up the last of it, and we're going to go ahead and flush some brake fluid through it. So typically, if you had fairly clean brake fluid, we wouldn't go to this extreme. I'm just going to fill it about a quarter of the way up, and I'm going to open up this banjo bolt just a little bit, or have it just slightly open, and see if we can get some brake fluid starting to flow through the brake system. Because a lot of times when they're completely dry with the lever that just pulls to a grip, it's going to be a little bit of a difficulty trying to get it to start flowing. So you want to do it with the banjo bolt before you even attempt to get it to brake fluid to the caliper. Sometimes you can just let it sit here. If you can't ever get it, it's probably got a clogged passage. At that point, you just unfortunately replace this whole entire master cylinder. So I have the banjo bolt open. I've been trying to get brake fluid to flow. I've even cheated and used like a shop vacuum to try to pull it through. So it looks like the orifice, the bypass orifice in this master cylinder is just clogged. And like I said, there's no rebuild kit for this, so I just recommend having a brand new master cylinder. So for ET4 597048, there's actually an updated one. The original one was a Gamika. This is a Hing Tong brand one. That's a replacement, more like the LX one, but It works perfectly fine. Can't get the Gramica one. That's the original Italian supplier of them. And we're going to go ahead and pull the banjo bolt back off. Pretty easy to change, especially when you have the handlebars to this level. We haven't really collapsed those crush washers too much, so we'll separate those. And you know, you got that brake fluid in there, sop it up. A little bit of brake fluid I did put in there, but there was nothing coming out of this, so I'm just SOL on this master cylinder. So we're gonna have to reuse the brake switch. You have a pair of wires that come right off this. Make sure brake switch works, because sometimes these are, you know, a little bit grimy and the contacts are failing on it. So you got the 2 Allen screws. So this is all stuff that you could typically find issues. You know, the brakes don't work well, and try to get them bled, but sometimes you just fail. So go ahead and separate that half, and then this will just pull right away from the handlebar. Sometimes you might also have to loosen the throttle, but not the case with this one. And you can see this, I don't know, I was going to call it a camshell, but that's what it looks like, but that's not what it is. It's like a cap, and it says up, and it has a pin in here that aligns with the handlebar. So pretty much just goes right there. Make sure you're not pinching any of the wiring. And you're not going to believe how easy it is to bleed when they're brand new. Actually, I think when they're new, they already have a little bit of brake fluid in the passages, so that's why they bleed real easy when they're brand new. And you can see they have a little cap in here. I'm not going to hook up the brake light right at the moment. It's kind of in the way. Pull that little cap out. Take our brand new crush washers. So pretty easy to swap out a master cylinder. I mean, we still haven't bled the system yet, but so take the 2 screws out, pull the cap off. We don't need to mess with that. It's all brand new and in good condition. And we'll start with just a small amount of brake fluid. These are a better design master cylinder. You can see the window's much bigger, easier to see. So there's some positives of putting a new one on here. It's an updated part. We're gonna get the brake fluid flowing, which should be pretty easy. Don't go too high with the reservoir. And it's starting to leak. Now, a lot of times you want to tip it up, because see, there we go. Now it's pumping the fluid. So at that point, I'm going to hold the lever and tighten the banjo bolt. So see, that was much easier with a brand new. It was just not going to happen with that old master cylinder, no matter how much I tried. I tried a lot off camera. You can show that. So go ahead and tighten this. Don't over tighten this. It is possible to break those banjo bolts. So we're going to make a makeshift bleed bottle, because you don't want to have the brake fluid just dripping all over the place. This is Dunkin' Donuts coffee with way too much sugar in it. It's pretty good though. So whatever, I don't know why I'm doing that, just to make it so you can see in it. Take the cap, and we'll just make like a little slot. Just be careful not to cut your hand. You know, something just to stick a hose right through it. So I got a little piece of that battery hose I was using earlier, and this just keeps the brake fluid from making a mess. And I'm gonna put the wrench on the bleed nipple. I'll show you another Easter egg on these older ET4. See that caliper that's made by Gramica? This is Piaggio, and I think that's always pretty cool. And I shared that when I reviewed my own personal ET4 that I have in my own collection. So pretty much we have this ready to go, so I can open and close that, because I'm going to need to do a combination of opening and closing the reservoir, and we'll see the fluid going down the brake hose there. So I'm going to go ahead and pump this up a little bit. I see bubbles coming out of the master cylinder. It's already building pressure already. So at this point, I could probably open the wrench, go ahead and close it. You don't need to tighten that much. Let go of the lever. Build up some pressure, open, and then close. And it's building up good pressure, but So kind of just, I'm building up pressure. You can feel the lever get much harder. And then we're gonna go ahead and open this. And there's obviously some restriction in the brake. It might need a new brake hose as well, because at this point, I'm building really good pressure, but it's not coming down through this reservoir here. This is all little issues that you might encounter with an old Vespa. You know, it's like I'm running into more issues. I got, you know, the lever's building pressure because my master cylinder is good. I could build really, really good pressure right up here, but even with this caliper open, or the bleed open, I cannot get any fluid to flow down. It's just the lever feels like a rock. So I know I probably got either a clogged brake hose or I got a clogged banjo. So I could check for a clogged banjo bolt. The banjo bolt is on the bottom down here. So I'm gonna put some pressure on the brake lever and go ahead and open that up. And does not look like we're having good luck here. So something's clogged. I'm gonna go ahead and remove that banjo bolt from the bottom of the caliper as well. So you might wanna have some rags handy if it does drip any nasty old brake fluid. So just like the master cylinder, this has a banjo bolt as well. And you can see some old yucky brake fluid. And I can see this banjo bolt is really gooey, and there's like chunks of stuff in here. So we may be able to clear it up. And look at that, that's probably where it's clogged. So we'll go ahead and wipe this up. We're gonna need another set of 127, 927 brake washers. It might even be worth just replacing this banjo bolt. But at this point, I probably can possibly free this up. You don't wanna look at this because, you know, the brake fluid is under very high pressure when you pull the lever, but let's see. And you know what? I think we're gonna need a whole new brake hose as well. So we were running into one problem after another. I am pulling the brake lever quite hard, and the fluid is not coming out of this hose. And I wouldn't be surprised, we might need a brake caliper as well. Fortunately, all these parts are still available. So no fluid is coming through this hose. So this is all stuff you can expect with an old scooter that's been sitting for a while. We'll probably get a brand new master or banjo bolt as well. You can see that hole right there is a little bit clogged with some type of crust in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull more parts for this. We're gonna probably put a brand new brake hose on this next. So fortunately, the brake hose and the banjo bolt are readily available. So I got a brand new banjo bolt, which is in between my thumbs, nice and clean, really inexpensive. 265451 is the Piaggio part number. And you can see the complete brake hose, and it fits the Vespa ET4s from 1996 all the way to the LX in about 2014. That's 564627, and it's a complete brand new brake hose. And it's an updated design. It's even got like a kind of a springy section of it that protects the hose a little bit. See, it's got caps in there. So we'll go ahead and pull the tire out of the way and get another set of crush washers, because we're gonna need a set of 4 crush washers to replace all these parts. So first of all, we gotta disconnect our brand new master cylinder from this old crusty brake hose. The lever doesn't really want to go in. We're going to carefully put the rag under it so I don't drip onto the bodywork. And you can see it just juices right out. I'm going to hold the lever to the grip. And the reason I'm doing that is it closes off a bleed passage or the piston. So the new master cylinder will no longer drip. It might drip a tiny bit, but it kind of keeps it from making a mess. Because if you don't zip tie that lever with brake fluid in it, it will just keep on dripping. I mean, it drips a little bit. Get that out of there. Probably, you know, that banjo bolt still is in really nice shape, so we're fine with that one. Just make sure you wipe up anything. It did, you know, the original master cylinder did come with that cap. You could put that back in, just to kind of keep it from dripping any further. You just do not want to get that brake fluid on the bodywork of a Vespa. It makes a complete mess. We're gonna get the front tire out of the way. and we'll need a 6mm Allen. So we'll be able to get access to that brake hose and route, pretty much route the new one in place of the old one. So get that wheel out of the way, and obviously have the jack kind of supporting the frame, and we'll be able to inspect the brake pads as well. There's a chance we might be replacing that master cylinder or that brake caliper as well. So, all right, so inside your fender is a metal clip with a little small screw that retains the brake hoses. So it may be a different style, they change it over the years, and then the brake hose is kind of routed right through the middle of the fork. We do have some drips around here from the old crusty brake fluid that's coming out. If I knew it needed a brake hose, I certainly would have changed it when I had the fork out, because it's much easier. Brake hose is disconnected. Pretty much it's just real critical to route it the same way that the old one was originally routed from the factory, because I see people get these all tangled up and you wonder why things bind up and you have problems and such. So the difficult part is it's routed along with your speedometer cable, and it's pretty tight through that little hole there. So see, it just pulls right out, and you might have to kind of snake the when you get to the banjo bolt, that's where it may be difficult. You can also spray some silicone spray on there to make it slide through easier, or if you really want to make the job easy, if you had the fork out, obviously you loosen the fender and you'll be able to route this out no problems. And pretty much I think it has to be routed from the top down. There's no way you're going to get it through from the bottom if you pull it from the top, if you pull the bottom, because you have this little plastic thing in the way. So if you're having difficulty getting the hose through, the way I am, loosen all 3 of these fasteners on the fender. You don't necessarily need to take them all off. I'm just gonna have them very loose, and at that point I can move the fender around a little bit, and plus they're pretty loose, so that's a good thing I'm checking them anyways. So we're taking to the next level. We're gonna drop the upper shock mount, and it's a pair of 8mm nuts. You need a 13mm, and check this out. Voila, got the brake hose out. So before we put it back together, of course, we're gonna put the new brake hose up, and you can see there's 2 different ends. Just the angled end, that's obviously gonna go up. So go ahead and route that through the hole. I did check to see if the speedometer cable, this is a perfect time to put a new speedometer cable in if there's an issue with the speedometer drive. All right, so now we'll get the clamp that holds the brake hose back in position. So you got your banjo bolt. I'm trying to hold the fork. The brand new banjo bolt. You have the new line here, and it does have a cap in there. You want to pop that little cap out. And we'll put the banjo bolt through with the last new crush washer. And now we'll be able to tighten it into the bottom of the master cylinder, or the brake caliper. So I have the new brake hose routed up here. I have the banjo bolt with a new crush washer, 127, 927, another crush washer on the other side. Just go ahead and line that up with the master cylinder. Go ahead and thread it fairly far along, and let's go ahead and tighten that up. Cut our zip tie, take a cover back off the master cylinder, open up that reservoir. We're gonna have to add more fluid, and back down at the bottom, have the wrench on the bleeder here, and we're gonna try again. I think we're gonna have success. Hopefully no issues with the caliper. Pump it up, and I'm watching for little bubbles coming up. That's pretty normal. And then hold the lever, open that up, let a little bit flow, pump it up. And this is a completely dry system. If you had a system you were just flushing the brake fluid through, it'd be much, much easier because you wouldn't be displacing all the air out of the brand new hose. And I can see my brake fluid starting to go down. More bubbles are coming up. Sometimes just tipping it over to the far left, that will help you because the air bubbles will go up the line, and that actually helps. So, and another way to do this is just you leave the banjo bolt off on the bottom and wait until the fluid starts dripping out of the bottom. That's another way to go about this. But I think we're getting really close. I could feel just a tiny bit of pressure right now. So we know we're getting really close and not too many bubbles are coming up. So at this point, look at that fluid. See that really dark fluid? So I'll go ahead and pump up the lever, open up the bolt here, pump up the lever, open up, pump up the lever, and just watch your level, because if it goes dry again, you're gonna have a lot of problems and be starting over. So it's already building pressure. Right now the lever doesn't come, it's pretty close to the grip, but so the rotor spins real nicely, and if I pull the lever, the rotor stops. So we know the caliper pistons are working, but we're going to continue to bleed this system, especially considering how bad the fluid looked that was coming out of that. So at this point, you want to be careful not to overfill the reservoir. You just want to fill it right until you still have a bubble in the window, and that's the correct level. If you fill it too high, the expansion with the heat will cause the brake fluid to come out, or if you have partly worn brake pads and you put new brake pads, it will overfill the reservoir. So go ahead and put the screws in there, and I think we're going to have an operational brake system. So before we put the wheel on, we do want to inspect the brake pads, and you can open up this little cover, and from the back side I can see they're about 50% worn. They still have brake material in there, and of course you can pull the brake pads out. And the way you'd pull the brake pads out, just to show you, there's this little C-clip or E-clip right here. Don't lose that. And obviously it's probably better if I use like a flat bladed screwdriver instead of my pocket knife, but I'll use my poor pocket knife. Then there's a pin that comes out, and then you have this little clip up here. So it goes all in that direction, and the brake pads, they should just slide right out. So I'll pull one out just to show you what they look like. On these older ET4 brake pads, they have 2 pistons, and there's the brake pads. You know what? I think I'm gonna actually replace those. Those are pretty thin. They still have life on them. You can see the material, but normally it'd be a little bit more than twice as thick. So the way you could do that, a lot of times I would also recommend putting a new rotor in there as well, or you know, the rotor's kind of, if it's worn, it is possible to kind of refurbish it with some sandpaper. If it's grooved or under the minimum clearance, then it just may be worth replacing the rotor. So brake pads are a little easier if you do pull the 2 Allen bolts that hold the caliper to the hub. And obviously you only can do this if the front wheel's out of the way. So and you can see the pad right in there, and it's a little sticky anyway, so it's a good thing that I'm pulling out. It's a perfect time to check to make sure those pistons aren't leaking, you know, since I was testing the brakes. And you know, I could pull the brakes and watch the pistons come in and out, and you got to use some sort of tool to push those pistons back in. And sometimes you could just use your old brake pads as well to push those pistons back home. So, you know, using your old ones is a good idea because you're going to chew them up. You just put a screwdriver in there, big flat screwdriver, and twist, and it will send the pistons back home. So without the resistance of the brake pads, we could check our wheel bearings. There's no free play in this hub. It may be a good idea to pull this cotter pin as well and re-grease the whole hub. But at this point, it feels pretty nice. But I wouldn't be surprised the grease is kind of on its way out as well inside the wheel bearings, the hub, and also the speedometer drive. So I'm going to use the Malossi brake pads. They're pretty affordable and very high quality, made in Italy. BP 030-M, I think is our part number, the Scooter West part number. So obviously the pad material goes towards the disc brake, and you'll put them on each side of the brake. And then the pin is going to go from the outside, this clip, kind of from the top here. And if they have quite a bit of pressure, they feel good, but with brand new pads. And again, I might sand up that rotor just so the new brake pads bite into the rotor without issues. So I got the clip. Go ahead and snap that in place. And get my mess out of here. We'll snap the cover back on. And I think we're good on the caliper. I don't think I'm going to need to replace it. That's a really cool caliper that still has the Piaggio logo on it. You don't find that on the newer ones. And I generally find the master cylinders go out before the calipers on these scooters as they age. So get all the Allen screws back in. Maybe worthwhile replacing the lock washers. They did change over to the wave washer for the lock washer on these, but they generally never have any issues if they're torqued correctly. So if you're unsure of torquing these, about 16 foot-pounds, and you just kind of go diagonal. And I'm probably going to have this back off because we'll put a new set of tires on this scooter, and we may even take the hub apart and re-grease the speedometer drive and the front wheel bearings. So our wheel spins nice and freely. We hit the brakes and it comes right to a quick stop. So far so good. Yet to test ride the scooter, but that will be next time. So I hope you found that interesting. It certainly was a lot of surprises for me. Wasn't expecting to replace both the brake hose and the master cylinder, but it's not surprising as well because I've seen this in our own workshop where I've found you need several parts to get a brake system back into proper functioning order. So it was more or less a full brake overhaul of the front hydraulic brake system on this ET4 versus just the basic brake flush, which you'd typically expect on a scooter that hasn't been sitting a little bit. You'd want to at least flush the brake fluid. And that's pretty easy when you do have brake pressure because all you're doing is adding more fluid and draining out the bottom versus replacing components that are completely full of air and you got to flush the brake fluid through. Again, thanks for watching. This is Robot here. Look out for the next episode of the resurrection of this 20-plus-year-old Vespa ET4. And we're so much closer to having it on the road. Thanks again, Robot here.